Hi everyone, welcome back to my RollerCoaster Tycoon Deluxe series. This is episode 6, and in this episode we'll be going through Bumbly Beach. Bumbly Beach is one of my favorite maps. It's a nice small parcel of land. You start with a few rides, which are fairly decent, and you get a fairly flat surface to work with. However, it is quite small, though you get the park rights to build on over the water and the beach area, which means that this will be the first map where I don't buy out all of the land, as there really isn't any reason to buy out all the park right land, as you can't build on the ground, so the scenery and things is quite limited. This is also the first map where the fact that I'm playing as the game as under the RollerCoaster Tycoon original Deluxe release instead of Open RCT2 or RollerCoaster Tycoon Classic means that I can only build in the land right area where I'm able to place things. So you can't hold shift and just set the height of things in this version of the game if you've never played it before and are unfamiliar with how this one works, which means that you have to kind of go with the default placement of things, and this is particularly bad when it comes to things like shops and stuff. You pretty much have to set the shop at the land height that it's going to give you because you can't alter the land. However, with roller coasters and other tracked rides, you can of course start them in one place and then configure the track into a location where you actually want the station, remove your starting track, and then build the course. So that's a strategy that I used several times in this. Coming into this scenario, I decided that what I wanted was a pretty simple layout. I wanted a beach theme with beach houses and nice sand, that type of a thing. So I don't get too complicated in this one. I would say that the complexity of this build sits somewhere in between Forest Frontiers and Leafy Lake or Dynamite Dunes. It's a little bit more complex than Forest Frontiers, but not by much. I don't make a whole lot of use of buildings, instead going for more of like a carnival type atmosphere with outdoor setting. Over the last week or so, I've had a lot of other projects going on that I've had to focus my time on, and so I decided that I would go ahead and start releasing the park outros, which I've always planned to do coming into this series, but I wanted to start releasing them about a month after I had done some videos and had some history. And so moving forward, every video 1 month after release will of course have a park outro only video that accompanies it. I just don't want to put the park outros out at the same time as the episode, as that would sort of dilute the episode. Though I know people probably just skip to the end of the episode in a lot of cases anyway because they don't want to hear me talk or watch the time-lapse or whatever the case is, but it's just to give the episode some time to breathe on its own before I put out a park overview with no time-lapse. The time-lapse has now begun. The first thing that I wanted to sort out was the entrance, where it has this wooden roller coaster, the Dipper, that sort of occludes the entrance. I've never been a big fan of how this has been set up, and you sort of just walk under the supports. And so what I decided to do for that was create sort of just a nice little brick structure with a tunnel that would go directly under the supports from the entrance, with a nice little water feature opening up into the main boulevard, which would also host the food court. As I start with a number of rides in this one, I decided that I could spend a good amount of time just getting the entrance looking right. I wanted to get the entrance completely finished first before I expanded into other directions so that it would sort of set the tone and the theme. As well, I didn't want to build too much before I had researched everything in this map, as you don't get a whole lot, and I definitely wanted the fantasy theme that you do unlock, although I don't use it a whole lot. I just sort of use aspects of it to augment the more foresty areas, or I guess they're not really forests, but the more like bush-filled areas that I end up creating around the edges of the map with the mushrooms and things like that, as well as decorate a few of the flat rides with the more fantasy elements and the chessboard and things like that. As a result, I end up spending probably the first year only building 2 rides and focusing completely on the food court area. And then during the second year, I kicked the research into high gear, build a few more rides before the end of the scenario, which is a 2-year scenario. No problem there. With the help of some ads and stuff, I was able to get comfortably over the population required in my park. And then I was able to focus on really building. The park development time in this one only ended up being about 10 years in-game. So this is a short build in comparison to the last 4 builds that I've done up since Forest Frontiers. I really wanted a very colorful, very bright beach boulevard with nice, brick planters, with the tropical trees. Not a lot of opportunity to use the tropical trees in this game, especially during the first set of scenarios. So whenever I get the opportunity to use them, I definitely take advantage of that. I wanted to extend the beach aesthetic into the park, but not have it consume it. So the idea is that the center of the park would sort of extend the beach aesthetic from the beach, as I mentioned, sort of creating these beach houses and things like that. And then it would go to several more grassy areas to the left and the right, and then the area in the lower section at the back of the park would be quite swampy. Following Evergreen Gardens, I took a little break because I had done so much in that one and I just needed some time to sort of decompress from park building. I had opened the scenario for Bumbly Beach and took a look at it, kind of started building right after Evergreen Gardens, and was just like, my brain was just drained of ideas as I threw a lot into Evergreen Gardens. And Bumbly Beach, by comparison, is so much less ambitious, and I was just not sure what to do about that. So I just needed to take a little bit of a break, reset my brain and my ideas, and come into it completely fresh and not still, in a way, building Evergreen Gardens. I didn't want to use a whole lot of buildings, but I do use them around the edges, primarily to serve as a transition for the bridges that are required to go out into the area where you have park rides. This allows me to sort of create a nice bridge through the roller coaster, similar to what I did with the entrance. And it also provides some nice decorations and stuff along the edge of the park, aside from just trees and roller coaster. It gives it a little bit of, a few extra textures in there. It gives a little bit more, and then I throw like as many fences and things surrounding it to just get as many different textures up against the roller coaster as possible, to sort of give it a much more structured and interesting look than just a roller coaster wooden structures sitting against the edge of the park. The only transport ride I use in this scenario is the monorail, though I do make use of the boat hire transport out in the ocean area. As I build 2 docks, I don't go crazy like some of the dock builds on Bumbly Beach. Marcel Voss in particular is what I'm thinking of here. His is quite extensive, but I did want to put a little bit something out there so that it wasn't empty. And instead of building like a 3rd dock or creating like a really elaborate network of docks with a lot of rides, given the problems with height, I decided that 2 small docks with rides and then a boat hire in between them was a good compromise. I reorganized the paths in this scenario so that it provides maximum building area. I've never been a big fan of how the paths by default are laid out in this scenario either, or where the information kiosk is placed by default. I have moved that so it's in a center position right in front of the entrance. After moving the path, it allows me to really begin expanding on aspects of the park, although again I don't move into the back half of the park until I unlock everything, and I do leave the flanking sides pretty bare bones as well until a little bit later. I really wasn't sure what I wanted those to look like. Honestly, I kept thinking about it and I was like, oh, should I theme it? No, I'm not gonna theme it. I'll wait till later. I'll wait till it's a little bit fuller and has more ride in it. For this map, I decided to go a little bit looser on color schemes. I wanted like blues, reds, greens, and yellows all sort of complementing each other, though I use various shades of the color. So in previous maps, I would typically choose like 2 or 3 colors, usually 3 colors, and stick with exactly those shades, except for maybe some exceptions where like a particular feature on a ride is a highlight or something like that, which allows me to use maybe a brighter version of the color or a darker version depending on what the color is, and allowing me to, do the highlight that way. But usually I stick pretty strict to color schemes, but in this one, given it's sort of a beach setting and beaches are usually very colorful with a lot of different colors, I decided to be a little bit looser. So some rides, it's like a darker red, and some rides a little bit lighter red, some rides is a darker yellow, other rides a light yellow, and I tried to give some variation that way. And then of course on top of that you have the beach houses, which provide a nice bright atmosphere. Now that I had sort of themed the front entrance, I wanted to create my monorail station. Monorail station will only have 2 stations, one in the back of the park and one on the beach. The monorail station also doubles as a station for a roller coaster. In this one I decided to go with the steel mini roller coaster as the first roller coaster I'd build, but instead of going with like the standard cars, I wanted to go with the spinning cars this time. And so as a result of that, the options I have on the track are a little bit limited. I can't use bank turns or anything, so if the roller coaster I'm building here looks a little weird, it's because I am designing it with the spinning cars in mind. I wanted this roller coaster to pretty much consume the back area, though I didn't want it to go too low in very many sections, as I wanted it to sort of hover above what would be down below in the area. I was planning to put some flat rides and tracked rides down there as well. I thought putting a pond in front of the monorail station with a nice bridge would sort of complement the tiny bridge that would be at the front of the park. I didn't use the jet stream decoration or the like the fountain decorations very much in this one, just because there's so much water everywhere. So normally in a map I would probably put like fountains around that bridge, but in this case I didn't, as I wanted to keep the more beachy feel where, you know, water isn't that special. This building ends up being probably the biggest and most complicated building in the map. I figured it was okay to have one fairly large building, as it's the sort of the centerpiece. Like, you know, if you walked into the park, you would kind of go through a tunnel. You would come out of the tunnel and you would see like this big beach boulevard with a giant building in the background. I honestly wasn't certain if I would keep this roller coaster, as after I had built it a few times and had done a few iterations, it kind of looked ugly, and I wasn't certain if it really fit. But I decided to keep it and just see how it would end up looking once the scenery and the surrounding rides were in place. And I'm actually pretty happy with the end result of what it ends up looking like. I really do wish that the houses, the decorations in the background would be included in the scenery set. Of course, those are from the Transport Tycoon game, or maybe it was his early prototypes of locomotion, I'm not sure. But yeah, it would have been cool if you could actually build those. It's one of the only pieces of scenery that you'll see in maps in the game that you can never build yourself. I do have quite a bit of planned for this channel. Getting back to the outro Park Complete videos that I've been putting out. As with my park builds, the process that I'm following to build the channel is going to be a slow burn. I don't want to go after everything I want to do all at once. I figured I'd start with just getting a history of episodes in a series out with RollerCoaster Tycoon. Though I do plan to do things like a website and other games, and even get into things like game development and programming and all sorts of different types of creative aspects that I enjoy personally. This building I wanted to make quite colorful. I decided to go with all of the main colors that I'm using in the map, mostly being the brick, the yellow, and the red. I thought it ended up looking quite nice, and I ended up using the tent entrance style to complement the ride entrances on the sides of it. I decided that a maze would be appropriate to fill the remaining space inside the roller coaster, mostly just because the maze has that brick style, which I thought would work good with the existing brick walls I had inside of there. And it's mostly visible. Again, everything with the layout of that coaster in particular, I don't particularly like it. Just seems to be mostly in the way. But I do make it work. And as with all prior scenarios that I've played, I don't like to remove the existing rides. So in future scenarios that will be the same. Any map that comes with existing rides, I will leave the existing ride intact and where it was. Getting close now to the point where I would expand into the beach. Just needed to build another house, as the original house, the yellow house, I thought looked really good, but I ended up building it 2 squares too close, and there's no pathway to the park-owned land. So I put another house that would act as sort of like a bridge destination, so I could bridge from the yellow house to the other house, and later on I ended up just putting a pathway back down to the main path through that house too. I really wanted to do a little bit more with the architecture over what I would have done in, say, Forest Frontiers. Especially coming off Evergreen Gardens, given, you know, that village that I had at the back of it and things. It was really quite nice, and I wanted to do more of that. But I just found that the area in this one didn't allow for a whole lot, so I really had to just stretch my imagination and think of where I could make architecture a little bit more complicated than just some basic buildings surrounding outdoor rides. I was determined to get the monorail through that coaster. I ended up having to make a few modifications, but I didn't want to go the closer path around the merry-go-round, as it just seemed that it was too not enough ride, I guess you could say. You know, I wanted to give them a little bit more ride before just taking off right to the beach, especially since the other side was a fairly direct path to the beach as well. That resulted in a change to the coaster, which ends up being the final change, and I really do quite like this design, especially once the haunted house and the other theming are integrated with it. I think it really looks quite interesting. I decided to extend the beach a little bit. I actually originally wasn't going to have the beach extend to even the lake. I just wanted it to sort of cover that plaza and then move out to the grass. But as I started building and moving out more and more, I just couldn't find the right look to get a blend, or I couldn't think of the right look to get a blend, rather. I didn't actually attempt anything that I thought of. And finally, once I had the chain link fence there, it was a lot easier to just make the whole thing sandy, as I think it looks a lot better that way anyway. I also wasn't sure if I wanted to make this area dense or if I wanted to make it sparse, like leaving a sort of a gap between the developed area at the front of the park and the more undeveloped area at the back, and I decided to go with the gap in the end. So I, between the lake, and then there's like that sort of like sandy gap between the haunted house and the stuff that ends up being at the front. And on the other side, I put a fair amount of gap between the coaster and the rides that end up at the bottom of it. I was actually thinking that I would make like a whole themed area, like a fantasy area off to the left there. But I think I'll save it for a different map though, that I get the fantasy theming as well as other theming types at the same time. I do a bit with it, but some of the ideas I was thinking would be like having a giant chessboard that, you know, had rides on it and things like that. Or maybe it would have to be multiple chessboards. I'm not exactly certain what the design of it would be, but I did want to sort of integrate the two ideas, but in the end I just ended up putting them sort of side by side. I did like how the 3D cinema ended up looking though, even though it was not exactly as I had originally wanted or was thinking when I kind of started building this area, being with the fantasy theme and everything. I do really like how that area ended up looking, just with the queue and the flower beds and the hedge walls and things. I think it looks really clean. It's probably one of my favorite rides in this map for sure. I honestly wasn't sure what I wanted to do with that little section beside the roller coaster. In the end, I just decided to put a few little sort of facade beach houses, each being a different color, and then one with brick as well. It's the only spot where I actually use the purple wall color. Everywhere else is either red or yellow, and I use green a little bit because it goes with the plants and all the other scenery, but purple I just felt didn't really fit anywhere. But given that I was having a whole bunch of different colored facades right side by side, I felt that it was okay in that one area, which makes that one house kind of unique. Having been not satisfied with the 3D cinema fantasy attempt, I made another attempt here. I guess you could say this is sort of like the ride sitting on a giant chessboard idea, but it doesn't end up being a chessboard, and then I put some cards on it and some of those candy things. Pretty much anything that I couldn't use anywhere else got used with the Gravitron in this particular setup right here. The fantasy theme I think I'll use quite a bit more when I replay this game with RollerCoaster Tycoon Classic with the advanced building tools, as creating like a huge fantasy Candyland type thing. I think will be really cool. But it's really hard to do it given what they give you in this one. I mean, it's not that hard, but I find that the amount of variation that you can really do, given they just give you the mushrooms and the candy and then some card walls, is not as much as I would like to be able to do. So I am really looking forward to reutilizing a lot of these themes in RollerCoaster Tycoon Classic when I finally have access to walls and I can put things at various heights and stuff. You know, I'll be going through all these builds again, and I think it's going to be quite a bit different. The end result will be a fair amount different than what you get in the pure RollerCoaster Tycoon Deluxe builds. I wasn't really certain at what degree I would want that monorail track stretching out to the beach, so I had just put it sort of temporarily in the general direction. But finally, when I got over to this area, I decided I wanted more area for rides, and for the first time since Forest Frontiers, I'm using a pre-built steeplechase. So that marks the steeplechase as now being used. But I hadn't used any pre-built since Forest Frontiers, as the terrain in the prior 4 scenarios just didn't really allow for it. So yeah, that was kind of interesting. I will try to use pre-built when I can, if it makes sense, and if I haven't used it previously. I decided I wanted to complete the monorail and get the majority of the rides in the beach area set up before I would complete the map. That way I would have an idea what the whole sort of overview would look like, and I could make the areas that were as yet finished more interesting in comparison to what was already existing in the park. Most of the roller coasters, well, I guess not most, because there's only 2 more, but there's a water slide as well that ends up being built out here in the beach area. I figured it would make sense to keep more of the advanced track rides out in the open, as there's so much space and there isn't really a whole lot else you can build out here aside from the water rides. See, ideally, if I had the ability to set the height of things that I build at the time that I build it, I would have probably put a food court in that little opening in front of the monorail station, but there's no way that I'm aware of that I can build at that height in this version of the game. Next, I wanted to do a corkscrew roller coaster. This ends up being the best roller coaster, I think, in the scenario. It was pretty good. I tried to do an interlocking loop, although I was pretty certain that I wouldn't have the velocity to actually make the interlocking loop, given that the second loop that I put on it ended up being quite a bit higher, and I didn't have the drop distance that I thought I would have. So the velocity slows down too much, and it didn't end up having the velocity to make the loop, but that was okay. I was still able to put a nice track through the vertical loop that did exist already, and it has a nice scorpion tail style inversion as well, along with a barrel roll style loop. The word for it isn't even coming to my head right now. I didn't want it to go over the water too much. I thought it would look better if it was just sitting on the beach and kind of like in front of the park. Though I do have a little bit there that goes into the water area, but for the most part I wanted to keep it on the beach itself. Yeah, didn't make the interlocking loops, but that's okay. I was pretty happy with the end result. It didn't actually need a whole lot of iteration. Pretty much once I had found a design that I wanted that worked without the interlocking loop, I was pretty much set, and that was it. It had fairly decent stats, all highs in the 7s, I believe. And of course that's without the scenery, as I can't put any scenery out in this area. I thought that kind of off green, off yellow was an interesting color choice for the coaster. Well, I guess it's not really green, it's more like the sort of color that's used for the water, I guess, that, I don't know, greenish blue. Now that the coaster was done, I wanted to create the 2 docks, and they would come off the ending of the paths there, and have the second and third food courts. In this map I only put 3 food courts, and in the main area of the park there's actually only the one, which is in the center. I just felt that the other areas were all too close to the center to have additional food courts there makes sense. And so I figured the best place for them to be would be in the beach area of the park, on either side of the boardwalk, I guess, or the docks here, as they're pretty far apart. And then here I'm building the boat hire transport ride that goes between the two. I really didn't want to have a whole bunch of tracks and stuff on top of the water. I wanted to keep the ocean area pretty clean. I was actually amazed that I ended up running out of money, as while I was building the inner parts of the park, I had saved up quite a bit of money, and I thought I had more than enough money to actually purchase all of the building rights that I would need to build out here. But they're quite expensive. I think they were about, I can't remember, I think they were 90 or 100 per tile, and it just chewed through my savings, and I actually had to go back to loans. Although I was making money so rapidly that any loans I did take were immediately paid back within a few weeks. Figured I would put a swan ride on this side as well. I wanted the swans to actually be able to go out into the water on their own, but they just sort of all collected in one little area. And they weren't able to get back to the station. None of them could ever find their way back to the station, which, I mean, I was sort of expecting given that the water area is so large and the way that pathfinding works. So I ended up having to put a track. This building here is probably the second largest building next to the monorail station building there, and I wanted it for the car ride. I thought it'd be kind of cool if the pathing to the entrance and exit kind of went through the front of the building and then out the side and then back into the building as well. It gives it a nice little sort of patio look, I guess you could say. For the first time in my build, I decided to give the monorail a little bit of color. I usually don't like to give the monorail color as it I don't know. Maybe it's because of Disneyland or other monorails I've seen, but monorail tracks I find are usually gray. Maybe black, but usually gray. And so I don't know. I'm sort of like biased towards the real world, and then so you might have noticed that even in all of my previously like theme parks, you know, I'll color the tracks, and then the monorail track is gray. So in this one, I was tempted to do something different, so I decided to make the bottom of the rail yellow to go with the sort of yellowy theme. Yellow is definitely the overpowering color. It's the primary color in this theming set for sure. And I thought in the end it actually looked pretty good. Of course, you can see that the gray is still on the top there. I couldn't let that go. I couldn't make the whole thing yellow. It just didn't sit right with me. I made heavy use of the hedge on brick wall style in this one as well. I really like to put hedges up against other surfaces. I don't like them standing on their own. Once in a while I'll use them on their own here and there, but for the most part it just seems like they're supposed to be like up against something else. And so usually when I use them, you'll see me put them up against a wall or put them up against another sort of like barrier or another piece of land. Often you'll see with that red house there, I put hedges up against the walls there, which is nice given that the wall textures are pretty plain in this, so it adds a little bit of depth to buildings. Along with any of the other walls as well, like the bricks and things. You can see I used the brick on the monorail side of things on the red house. Same idea. And I've used that strategy pretty much in every build so far. It's definitely useful when you don't have access to the more advanced walls that come with RCT2 and you're stuck with the land in RollerCoaster Tycoon Deluxe. It gives it a little bit of character and doesn't make it look so plain. Of course, that's only given if you have the space to do it. See, like I would have loved to put hedges in front of the buildings at the edge of the park there, but because of course the buildings are the land, there's no way to put the hedges in front of the buildings. So there is downsides to the way that this is set up, and you can't always use them in every circumstance, but I do try to use them when it's possible. Basically, the way that I decided to do the outer parts of the beach area, I would have a water slide on one side and then the bobsled coaster on the other side. So there would be 3 tracked rides and then 3 sort of water rides, although the third water ride isn't really a water ride, it's the swinging ship. So it's more a flat ride, but I thought it would be more suitable to build it out on the water area. And so in the end, each pier has 2 rides and then the connecting boat hire. Decided to put together another building for the inverter ship, and also to give the monorail sort of a little separator building to go in and out of the park on this side, as this side was pretty building heavy. I didn't put any monorail tunnel buildings on the other side of the park though, so one side has a fair amount of tunnels, although they're short tunnels, and then the other side's pretty open. Again, going with the yellow and red style of paint with a brick base. I do think the fantasy theme worked out pretty well on the outer edges of the park with the mushrooms and stuff. I wish the mushrooms were a generic option, honestly. It would be kind of nice to have something a little bit different to throw into the bushes and stuff instead of just trees. Same thing with like rocks and stuff. Like RollerCoaster Tycoon 3 has rocks, but RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 doesn't. Would have been nice to have some generic rocks to put in places as well, and really just other sort of just objects aside from various forms of bushes and trees. Quarter tile objects, not the full-size ones. I know there's a few statues and stuff that are full-size, but there's no like nice decorative quarter tile generic options aside from bushes. And I do find that like one of those mushrooms placed here and there, I use them quite a bit more when I fill out this back area with trees. I use the mushrooms to give a little bit of character to it, and I found that it looks really nice. It definitely fits with the overall theming of it, and it really just would be nice if those were included in the generic side of things. Just the mushrooms though, not the other parts like the candy and things like that. Would have been cool if there was another variation of the little cottage house that comes with the fantasy theme as well. It was at about this point where I was pretty sold on the vision for the junior roller coaster or steel mini roller coaster there. I was just looking at it, I was like, yeah, this is really gonna look neat once everything is set up, and now that I've got the space shot set up in the one loop and the haunted house on the other side with a bunch of bushes and things below, and I end up putting another car ride on this side as well, so it's flanked by a car ride on either side that goes kind of underneath it. Here's the mushrooms that I wanted to utilize I really like the beige ones in particular. It's unfortunate that there isn't a quarter tile version of those mushrooms, but I do think they look really nice with the dark green bushes and the smaller version of the bushes and stuff. Probably look pretty good in a forest like Forest Frontiers as well. Instead of the other food courts, I did put a few random food stalls and a souvenir stall near the back of the park to sort of take the place of the food court, as there was a few guests complaining about being hungry. And a hungry guest is a sad guest, and we definitely don't want that. I believe this is the last ride. Oh, maybe did I do Space Rings already? I can't remember. Might be the last ride. I think I called this one the Rickety Raceway. I thought that was an apt name for what it ended up being. I made the track green, which is one of the only green rides, like pure green rides, in the scenario. No. Okay, yeah, the bobsled coaster here is the final ride that I built. Yeah. How could I forget about the bobsled coaster? I love building these things. They're so fun. Really, the only challenge with this one was I didn't want it to get in the way of everything. Like, I didn't want a whole big roller coaster spaghetti mess out on the beach. I wanted each coaster and each ride to really have its own sort of different area, and have its own area, I guess. I don't really have another word for it. But just not be like a big jumbled mess. Sometimes I like to do that, although I haven't really done that yet. I'm certain, though, with some of the upcoming scenarios here, there's going to be some spaghetti roller coaster stuff going on. But I will, of course, try to keep it somewhat stylish. The final thing I decided to do was just go and sort of fill in all of the missing lights, benches, and garbage cans that I had been a little bit lax on putting those down, as given the layout of what I did here, where it's a bunch of different squares and stuff, I didn't want to really place very many of them until I had the whole layout. And that way it would allow me to sort of balance them out and make it look somewhat natural. So we've now reached the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed this build, and here is the end result.